Okay, welcome to the Mystery Matt M.O. allegedly YouTube show. Yeah, I bungle that up every week, don't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, so this is Greg.
Hi, good
Greg's
to
first
see me.
time doing a true crime podcast, and this one's a little bit lighter, but with a crap ton of information. So we are covering the case of John Dillinger, the most infamous bank robber in America.
Show number one.
Yes! Show pick 01 of J. Dillinger. I might end up calling him JD just to shorten things.
Hey, Mr. David.
As in the wrestler?
No. Oh,
Okay.
JD McDonough. Hopefully you're back soon. Um, so John Dillinger Jr., John Herbert Dillinger Jr., was born on June 22nd, 1903 in Indianapolis, Indiana. His parents were John Dillinger Sr. and Mary Ellen, also known as Molly Lancaster. And they married in 1887, and in 1889 they had a daughter named Audrey. Jr. was a happy toddler. He loved his tricycle and his wagons, and he was a very happy toddler. But just before he turned 4, his mother, Molly, passed away of a stroke on February 1st, 1907. His sister, Audrey, helped raise Junior, and as he got older, like a little bit older, she was already off married. She ended up moving back home with them to help raise him. John Sr. remarried in 1912 to Elizabeth Fields, also known as Lizzie, and they had 3 children named Herbert, Doris, and Francis, one boy and 2 girls. And after his father remarried, for some reason, John started running away a lot.
Jealous.
Maybe? That's the only thing I could draw that conclusion to, especially as we get to know John Dillinger throughout this series, like this episode. You realize how he's very, I don't want to say self-centered, but into himself, like not narcissistic completely, but, there's a little bit there.
I think he's more like the center of the attention.
Yeah, he liked
Kinda.
to be attention.
Yeah, seeker. So
Yeah.
I could understand why he was running away.
Yeah. So he was described by his teachers as being a prankster, but he had a good side which balanced off his mischievous side. He was good with mechanical things and could care less about academia, which a lot of us can relate to, I'm pretty sure. We prefer to do arts or whatever opposed to math.
Science.
Science.
I like geography.
I love geography.
That's my favorite.
Yeah. But he was also, his schoolmates said that he was a bully and he was kind of frightening. He came off as frightening. In grade 6, John stole coal from a railroad car, and he managed to escape the jail time because he was a juvenile.
Yeah.
So you're going to already see that in as early as grade 6, which would be age 13, age 12, 13? 12?
11.
11?
I think so.
So wait,
Or
she's
12 is grade 7.
So 11, 12.
Yeah.
11, 12 years of age.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
Still fairly young.
It's pretty young, yeah. Not as young as what's his face from last time. What's his face? Clifford Olson from last episode. He dropped out of school at age 16 and started a job at a flooring factory. He would only keep jobs for a short period of time because he liked getting the money, and once he got the money he wanted, he'd quit his jobs. So when the money ran out, he'd go get another job and start the cycle over again. So he wasn't very reliable in terms of work, or he just did not like working.
Well, he found another hobby that he liked
Found
more.
another hobby, yeah. That was easier money. And then his stepmother and dad sold the grocery store that they owned in Indianapolis and moved to Mooresville, Indiana, and bought a farm. But John didn't really like it there. He didn't really like the slow pace of the farm life, so he wanted to go back to the city. But he did play baseball. He loved playing baseball, but never professionally. And he idolized Jesse James. So
A lot of people from his time did. Jesse James was kind of like the first beginnings of what a superstar could be.
the Wild West.
Yeah.
Yeah, anti-hero, I guess. Would you say?
Wyatt Earp and
Yeah.
the Kid.
Yeah, like that era was big back then,
Yeah,
right?
Cowboys and Indians were the big thing back then, and yes, I said it, but that's what it was called.
That's what it was called back then, yeah. No fault. Not blaming.
And was it racist? Absolutely, all of it was.
Yep.
But a lot of it was good cinema too.
Yes.
One of my favorite movies ever was one of the, I think it actually came out in the 80s. It was a rendition of The Lone Ranger. And it was really, really well done. I can't remember who starred in it, but...
Well, even reruns of, like, Bonanza and stuff like that have to have disclaimers at the front, like, before the show and through the commercials and stuff. Warning people, like, this is from a different time, and these are the words they used. Doesn't reflect our views from today. Yeah.
Oh, they didn't back then?
No, that's because they didn't have that. They didn't care.
It was then back then.
It was then back then, yeah.
Yeah.
So in July of 1923, John Dillinger stole a car with a revolver in his possession, just to cause trouble. Little shit disturber. Police were able to stop him, and they grabbed him by his coat, but JD slipped his coat and got away.
Yeah.
Excuse me. The next day he enlisted in the Navy, and although he finished his basic training, when he was shipped out on assignments, he didn't quite do so well. He went AWOL, not once but twice, and each time he ended up spending time in the brig, just eating bread and water, and he had a $50 bounty on his head, and he was listed as a deserter. Yeah. So back then, that was high crime. High crime.
Yeah, you can't do that back then.
No, well, today they're like a little more lenient. In April of 1924, he married Beryl Ethel Hovius, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right, on the 12th. And she was 17, but she lied about her age and said she was 18, and JD was 21. Later that same month, he was busted for stealing 24 chickens.
Not 25?
No, 24. That's a very specific number. They were fancy chickens by the sounds of it. I can't remember the name of them.
I saw the video when I was watching it, and they were like big chickens.
Big freaking chickens, yeah.
Like, I've never seen chickens like that before.
No,
like,
there was
so
a fancy name for it in the book, but I never wrote it down, so oops, my bad. Anyway, so John Sr. was able to talk his son out of getting charged for stealing the chickens. Maybe he shouldn't have. On September 6, 1924, John Jr. and his distant in-law on his birth mother's side, Eddie Singleton, planned to rob a grocery store owner, Frank Morgan. So Morgan had this habit of pocketing all the money from the day's take and walking home with it in his pocket. And he was in his mid-60s, so he wasn't a spring chicken. See what I... Anyways, so they had watched him for some time, and they figured out his route, and so they decided to rob him. So Eddie parked the car around the corner, stayed in the car. John took his gun and held up Frank Morgan, and Frank Morgan, was wearing a hat, and when JD went to smack him in the head with it, like pistol whip him in the head, he fell down, but he wasn't knocked out because the hat kind of helped the blow, right? So he gets up and he fights away. He gets the gun away from JD, shoots it in the air, which apparently Eddie Singleton, the master criminal that he may have been, panicked and took off.
Yeah.
And then JD, John Dillinger, went to some bar, was saying, hey, did you guys hear these gunshots and all this stuff? Well, that kind of made him look bad and guilty. And a day and a half later, he was arrested at his father's farm. So good job. Good job. Anyway, so John was...
Would you think that was better than the chicken one, or...
I think being pinched for an attempted robbery and assault over chicken theft sounds better.
Yeah.
But maybe would have been prevented if he had been charged with the chicken theft.
Probably.
Right? To know a horse, you have to look at his track record.
That's right.
So, John Sr. convinced his son to plead guilty. And later came out, he pleaded guilty to assault and robbery. And it later came out that the evidence that they had on John was all circumstantial, which actually pissed him off, and he felt betrayed by the justice system, and he vowed that he'd be the meanest bastard whenever he gets out. He was sentenced for 10 years.
Yeah.
He was sentenced for 10 years.
For assault and robbery.
Also, wasn't the judge, like...
The judge was also trying to make a point.
Yeah, he was new, I think, too.
Yeah, I didn't write the judge's name down, but it does come back into play a little bit later. So he was incarcerated at Pendleton Penitentiary, and where he met Harry Pete Pierpont, Charles Mackley, and Russell Clark. They would work together in the various prison factories, most notably the shirt shop. He also met Homer Van Meter at Pendleton on July 29th, 1929. Then Pierpont, Mackley, Clark were transferred to the harsher Michigan City prison, and soon after Van Meter was also shipped there. So Dillinger also attempted to escape twice, and he had extra time added to his sentence. Then he pushed to be transferred to Michigan City to join up with his boys, but under the guise that they had an actual better baseball team. Not that it matters, right? You play baseball in prison, what's that get you? Anyway, so while in prison, John's wife, Beryl, filed for divorce. John joined his friends in Michigan City, where they all worked in another shirt shop. So the shirt shop, I guess, was like a factory where they made shirts, and there was a seller on site who would sell them. In March 1933, Dillinger was up for parole, and his hearing was scheduled for April. In that time, his family rallied behind him and put together a petition for his release with 188 signatures, including Frank Morgan, his victim, and the judge who sentenced him, and Governor McNutt. I'm waiting for you to make a McNutt joke.
Too easy.
Too easy? Yeah. In May 1933, John was released, as was Homer Van Meter. The world he knew was different when he went into prison. And the dirty 30s was a time of depression, financial disparity, strife, homelessness. And in Indiana alone, over 100,000 people were jobless and on welfare. 10 million people were out of work in the entire country. The public was angry at the banks for foreclosing on their homes and businesses. So, while in prison, Dillinger did make it a point to learn all about various crimes by listening to other inmates. He kept a list of all the vulnerable banks or easy targets referred to as jugs. Sorry, had to. It's right there. Law enforcement struggled to keep up with crime, and they were underpowered in every single way. They didn't have the weapons that many of the gangsters like Al Capone had. They certainly didn't have the fast vehicles that the criminals were able to procure for themselves. They were driving V4s, maybe V6s at the most, while the criminals had access to V8 cylinder vehicles. Now, I'm a girl, and not a very good one, because I don't know the difference between a V4, V6, and V8. But if I'm going to go by my mental capacity, V8 to me would be better because it'd be higher number, faster. So that's where I'm thinking the V8 is where it's at.
Yeah.
Okay, and they also didn't have, because all they had were basically 4-cylinder Model A Fords back in those days. So you're talking about like really janky fucking cars. At least they're not the crank ones, right? From the 1900s, like early 1900s, the Model Ts.
That would be funny. Trying to rob a bank with that. Right, I have to crank it up before we leave. They're here already, the police.
And police only had one-way radios. So they could only receive messages from the station. They couldn't actually respond. So, remember that, because that comes into play much later. So, John would eventually ditch the prison-issued suit and gravitate towards a much stylish approach with 3-piece suits. He was a very stylish, not a bad-looking man either. He also took his knowledge of the banks to a group of youths who did small-time robberies, usually in gas stations or small stores, called the White Cap Gang. With Noble Clegholm and William the Kid Shaw, the three of them pulled their first job robbing an all-night grocer called City Foods. Problem was that the gun that Dillinger chose was a really long Colt. I don't remember what the caliber was of it, but it stuck out of his jacket pocket, which alerted the clerk, who screamed to alert the manager. So Shaw stole $100 from a register, and Dillinger used his Colt to keep everyone at the back of the store and pistol whipped an old man so hard that the dentures shattered. So, yeah. There's to Nancy's no teeth thing that she had in her dream last night.
Guess so.
Yeah.
Back then, they were made out of wood, though, probably.
I have no idea what the hell they were made of, but it said shattered, so I don't know how easy it would be to shatter wood dentures. Right? So Dillinger and Shaw added Paul Lefty Parker, and I love these nicknames. I love the nicknames, and my favorite one's coming up. I'll let you know. You'll know. They added Paul Lefty Parker to their group and took another job robbing the Haag, H-A-A-G? Is that Haag or Hog?
I'm going to say Haag.
Haag. Let's go with Haag. Haag drugstore. And during the robbery, Lefty decided to practice his parallel parking, which put John Shaw in a panic when they came out of the store and couldn't find him, but they still managed to get away. So, yeah. Talk about your Keystone robbers, right? Then they then hit a Kroger, which the Whitecaps had hit a month before. But Dillinger didn't know that. Shaw lied to him when Dillinger asked if he had hit the store before. Shaw said no. So, needless to say, that didn't go over very well because all they got were a few small bills and some cigarettes.
It's better than nothing.
I guess. But Dillinger was getting annoyed with this gang. And who wouldn't?
Yeah.
And the small-time robbers, like, they just wanted the small-time things. He wanted bigger. Like, he was thinking larger and more. He had bigger aspirations.
Yeah.
Bigger ideals. He wanted more experienced partners, and I can't say I blame him. He even took his share of the stolen money and gave it to a lawyer in an attempt to stack the deck to get Pierpont out of prison when he came up for parole. On June 22nd, Dillinger and Shaw scouted out a bank, but it was a no-go. Dillinger's list was out of date as the bank was boarded up. Then they robbed Eaton's sandwich shop, and the takeaway was $340. John took a car to Kentucky to meet up with friends Frank Whitehouse, Whitey Muller, and Sam Goldstein. His plan was to form a dream team, but the White House backed out because his wife would never let him do it. Pistol whip. Dillinger joined Shaw and Claycomb and ex-dirt track race car driver Hilton Pizzy Wizzy Crouch on a new job. Come on, Pizzy Wizzy. Say it.
Pizzy Wizzy.
It's fun. Pizzy Wizzy. Now that's my favorite name right there. Pizzy Wizzy. The plan was to rob a red-headed woman who drove to each Hag drugstore chain to pick up money to prevent robberies. Irony. They knew she went every 3 days to 22 stores, and her last stop was on 9th and Pennsylvania Ave. Her next pickup would be on Monday, July 10th. Pizzy Wizzy was under specific instructions not to turn the car off because it would fry the jumper. I don't know what that means. The jump line, or something like that. I'm assuming the starter. Whatever, right? So when Shaw and Claycomb showed up in their car on 9th, they didn't see Dillinger and Pizzy Wizzy. So they thought Pizzy Wizzy and Dillinger double-crossed them. But when they did show up, it was because Dillinger said that the car ran out of gas, and Shaw knew that was bullshit because he filled up the car the night before himself. But what had actually happened was that Crouch, Pizzy Wizzy, turned the car off and fried the jump line. He did the one thing he was told not to do. So they were starting to feel the heat from law enforcement. Who wouldn't at this point? Like all these little things, but I don't imagine it was such a big deal yet. So Shaw and his wife, Claycomb and Parker, took off to Muncie, Indiana with the prospect of meeting up with Harry Copeland. John ended up joining them and hitting up a barbecue joint. The next day at a garage, police busted the entire crew except Dillinger and Copeland, who were down the street watching it go down before getting the hell out of there. On July 17th, John and Copeland decided to rob a bank themselves. Copeland sat in the car and Dillinger took on the one bank teller himself. He jumped the counter like a jackrabbit, which would become his nickname, and he filled his bag with cash and jewelry from the vault. Shaw gave up Dillinger under questioning and was sentenced to 10 years. Claycomb was also sent back to prison. And what he got from that bank robbery was $3,500.
You want me to show any of these pictures? Or?
No, just keep John up there. I'll tell you one. On July 19th, Dillinger and Copeland pulled another bank robbery, and as they left, Copeland tossed roofing nails behind their car, which would become a signature for their getaways. Because, let's face it, car tires back in the 30s, not so great. So Dillinger also drove to Dayton, Ohio to see a woman he believed he was deeply in love with, Mary Jenkins Longnecker. So she was married, apparently, and her brother, James Jenkins, was in prison. And her husband had taken off, they were separated. He had the kids. He had her 3 kids. So, anyways, John was trying to get the kids back and get the divorce expedited, but it never happened. On April 14th, Dillinger and Copeland robbed yet another bank in Montpelier, Indiana, for $6,700. At this point, ex-Pinkerton detective Forrest C. Huntington was hired by Indiana Bankers Association to hunt the robbers down. Shaw also gave up the hideouts to Huntington. And Huntington joins forces with State Police Captain Matt Leach. Leach had Pizzy Wizzy's house under surveillance, as well as the post offices in Mooresville and Maywood, who were tracing all of the mail going to the Dillinger family. Which I think should be illegal. Isn't that illegal?
Well, if you're trying to bust someone, I think it's not.
I guess if you're just looking at the envelopes on the outside, right?
Yeah, as long as you don't open it.
Yeah. I'm sure they were opening it. On August 14th, J.D., John Dillinger, and 4 others robbed a bank in Bluffton, Ohio, escaped with either $2,000 or $6,000. I keep finding discrepancies. It's I see things for 2,000. I see things for 6,000. I see nothing in between. So I just put both down. So we have no idea which amount is accurate. In Dayton, police discovered Mary Jenkins Longnecker's new apartment thanks to her nosy landlady and started watching it. John and crew on September 6th hit the Massachusetts Street Bank in Indiana and walked away with $22,000. But unfortunately, Harry Pierpoint's parole hearing didn't go as planned, and John put together a plan to hide guns in a shipment to the Michigan City shirt shop so his boys could escape. But then John was arrested at Mary's thanks to the nosy landlady. 2 days after Dillinger's arrest, the crate he sent with 3 guns hidden in spools of thread made it to the shirt shop inside Michigan City Pen. Walter Dietrich, another inmate, took the guns and hid them and told Pierpont. The shirt shop boys who were scheduled to escape were Pierpont, Charles Mackley, Russell Clark, John Hamilton, Mary Longnecker's brother James Jenkins, Edward Schaus, Joseph Fox, Joseph Burns, James Clark, and Earl Northern, who was the brother to Mary Kinder, who was putting them all up once they escaped. You can put up pic 2 of the terror gang now. The crime pack. The breakout was scheduled for September 28th, but some other inmates got word and started to squeal. So on September 26th, Dietrich called the shirt shop supervisor to the factory to tell him that he had a sale, and then they took him hostage. All except Earl Northern, who had contracted TB, tuberculosis, was in isolation in the infirmary. They all managed to escape, taking on 2 separate vehicles and went in different directions. Pierpont, Mackley, and Hamilton, Jenkins, Schaus, and Russell Clark arrived at Mary Kinder's. They had to break the news about her brother, and she had to break the news about John Dillinger being in jail. So, yeah. So anyways, and then Harry Copeland showed up to give money to Mary to go out and buy 6 suits in all different sizes. And Pierpont planned to return the favor by breaking JD out. James Clark was the first to get arrested after the escape before the gang was even back together, and James Jenkins was shot and killed by a farmer while trying to get back to the others. On October 12th, Pierpont, Clark, Mackley, Schaus, Hamilton, and Copeland met outside the Allen County Jail in Lima, Ohio. Pierpont and Mackley and Clark busted in the Sheriff Jesse Sarber's office just after dinner. The sheriff, his deputy, were unarmed, and his wife was relaxing at the time. Pierpont told them that they were there to take Dillinger back to Michigan City, but the sheriff, Jesse Sarber, wanted to see his credentials. And instead, in the classic, what I think is a classic movie line, Pierpont responded, "Here's your credentials," and then started shooting. A bullet tore through the sheriff's abdomen and into his thigh. He was pistol whipped. His wife Lucy was freaking out because, ladies back then were really dramatic.
Yeah.
Gave the gang the keys to stop the shooting and so she could take care of her husband. When John heard the shots fired, he stopped playing his game of pinochle, grabbed his suit coat, and waited. And as soon as Pierpont got those doors open, he walked out with his group. Rescued. Now escaped from prison. So yes. So unfortunately, Sheriff Jesse Sarber passed away due to the result of blood clots in his brain from the pistol whipping, not the actual bullet entering his thigh. But Dillinger wasn't happy about this. He didn't want the sheriff to be killed. He kind of liked the guy. Right? Plus, killing was not John Dillinger's style.
No.
So, yeah. Anything? Did you want to add anything? Did I miss anything?
No, I think you've been really good so far.
All right. So, the first order of business once you're out, what do? You need weapons.
Yep.
Where do you get weapons?
Police.
Weapons and pizza. On October 14th, Dillinger and Pierpont held up an Auburn, Indiana police station. 2 officers and stole a Thompson submachine gun, 2 .38s, a .30 caliber Springfield rifle, a Winchester semi-automatic rifle, a shotgun, a .45 Colt automatic, a Smith & Wesson .44 revolver, 25 automatic pistol from Spain, 9mm German Luger, 3 bulletproof vests, supply of ammunition, and a partridge in a pear tree. The gang then moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, and Captain Matt Leach told the media that Dillinger was responsible for 24 bank robberies in 2 months, which was simply not true. He also told them that Dillinger was more dangerous than Machine Gun Kelly.
The first one, not the new one.
Not the rapper guy who I still don't believe is a real person. But I don't think that's also true either, because I think Machine Gun Kelly was named Machine Gun Kelly for a reason. So, he blamed Ohio for allowing Dillinger to escape, and said that if they had handed him over to Indiana, the escape would never happen. Keep that in mind.
I don't want to.
Yeah. A few days later, Dillinger and Pierpont walked into a Peru, Indiana police station after 11 p.m. and held up 2 cops before stealing another arsenal of weapons. 2 Thompsons, tear gas, 3 rifles, 2 sawed-offs, 12-gauge shotgun, guns and revolvers, 9 bulletproof vests, 3 badges, handcuffs, and a crap ton of ammunition. So I think they're loaded. I think they're set. On October 23rd, the gang hit the Central National Bank in Greencastle, Indiana, for approximately $32,000. But during their escape, they had to stop for a slow-moving train, but were able to detour down a dirt road. It kind of was like one of those movie moments where you're like, oh, crap. You know, like, shit. You know? 30 years later on the TV show, interesting enough, on the Waltons. Do you remember the Waltons? They actually, because the Waltons were set back in the 30s, they were actually seen gathered around the radio listening to the police report on the radio of this escape, of this robbery, that John Dillinger hit this bank. Kind of neat, actually. So.
He was a mainstay. He was a star.
He's a star. Captain Leach's second in command made the ridiculous request that trick-or-treaters not dress or participate in activities in which law enforcement might mistake these 3-foot-tall children as actual gangsters. I know law enforcement can be stupid sometimes. We've seen how they've handled cases that we've covered. Mm-hmm. They're not the brightest. But they have to be smarter than that. Unless it's a gang of vertically challenged people dressed as gangsters that are vaulting over bank counters and robbing them, you're not going to mistake a 3-foot child for a gangster. It's just stupid. Anyways, I thought that was interesting, so that's why I kept it in. I guess I could have omitted it, but it was kind of funny, and I had to. But the public was on Dillinger's side. Reporters taunted Captain Matt Leach. One even sent him a book entitled How to Be a Detective. He was nicknamed 2-Minute Late Leach because he was always missing Dillinger by just mere minutes. The public thought Dillinger was the best because he was taking on the banks and robbing the banks and saw him as a modern-day Robin Hood, even though he wasn't really giving back to the poor. But they didn't care because he was taking the banks. And the banks were what took them, right? So, anyway, so the gang moved to Chicago, where the gangs knew that the crime was abundant and the corruption was high. And they managed communications with 2 associates of Babyface Nelson.
He's not on this picture of 6, right?
No. You could throw up the picture number 3 of Evelyn Billy Frechette. The gang had a group of ladies called Malls. Dillinger was madly in love with Evelyn Billy Frechette, and Pierpont and Mary Kinder was together. Now, Billy was the head Mall, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She was actually not bad looking.
No.
Pretty young lady. Half French, half native. Police kept missing their opportunities to snag Dillinger. On a tip from a contact, they were able to track Dillinger to a dermatologist appointment, but they used a confiscated car from associate Sam Goldstein that Dillinger recognized when he and Billy exited the office. So they outsmarted the authorities in their own vehicle and got away. If you knew that Sam Goldstein was an associate of John Dillinger, why would you use a car? That John Dillinger who knows cars. By the way, John Dillinger changed cars throughout his entire career like we change underwear. All the time.
Because he had the money.
Sometimes, no, he just stole them.
Oh, right.
Or some of them he stole and some of them he didn't. Cars weren't expensive back then, though. Like, $700 for a brand new car. Like, that's ridiculous.
Can't get that now.
The gang ended up expelling Harry Copeland for excessive drinking, worried that his mouth would become a problem. But Shouse also left because he had developed feelings for Dillinger's girl Billy and didn't want to eat a bullet. On November 19th, Copeland was arrested but never gave up his friends. In fact, he was going through rehab at the time in jail. But he never ever opened his mouth about his friends. That's the loyalty. The Dillinger and gang moved to Wisconsin, where they hit up the American Bank and Trust Company. It's alleged that they had help from the bank manager, Groven Weiland. It was the first time police showed up during the actual robbery. The terror gang surrounded themselves with hostages to get out of the bank safely and then placed the hostages on the floorboards, the running boards or whatever you call them, around the car to prevent law enforcement from shooting at them because they didn't want to hit the civilians. It worked, and this would be a tactic that they would use multiple times after. The hostages would be dropped off one by one, unharmed and safe. J. Edgar Hoover, who was the head of the Bureau of Investigation, not the FBI because that did not exist yet, named Dillinger as the number one criminal at large. Hoover wanted Dillinger caught so that it could help him facilitate his goal of making a federal law enforcement agency, which Congress was unsure about at this time. On December 14th, the gang headed south in various directions with plans to meet up, which they did in Daytona Beach, Florida, or Jacksonville. I got two different ones. The gang rented a house, partied, shopped, and relaxed, even went down to Miami for races. When they left, the group separated again, and on January 15th, 1934, Dillinger and Hamilton, as well as a third man, returned with Billy to Indiana. The three men robbed a bank in East Chicago, Indiana, where all hell broke loose. Hamilton was shot badly, Dillinger was wounded, but it was the first and only time Dillinger ever killed anyone. Patrolman Officer William O'Malley fired 4 shots into Dillinger, and Dillinger got off 8 shots into O'Malley. When Dillinger found out about O'Malley's death, he couldn't handle it and went into denial. John Hamilton's injuries were bad enough that Dillinger actually went and found a less than stellar reputation doctor who had been convicted for botched abortions to patch up Hamilton, as well as Dillinger's wounds, right? But Hamilton was worse off than Dillinger. So this doctor charged them $5,000 for this house call and patched up Hamilton, and Hamilton stayed back to recuperate. Further down the line, it comes out that they kind of tell authorities that Hamilton is dead, even though he's not.
Right.
But actually, that's a great tactic when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the gang took up residence in Tucson, Arizona. Charles Mackley and Russell Clark got wasted one night in a hotel bar and talked way too much. The next day, on January 25th, Mackley and latest gal pal Madge Ritzer were arrested while shopping at a radio store. Undercover showed up at the house Russell Clark and wife Bernice were renting and took them into custody after a fight. Tucson police failed to keep the Clark home under surveillance when Pierpont and Mary Kinder showed up. Seeing all the furniture overturned, for some reason I went Swedish there, realized that they needed to get out of Arizona and rushed to leave. But while they were driving, they got pulled over by police saying that, you don't have tourist tags or tourist permits, whatever the hell that is. I don't know if that's a thing. And convinced Pierpont to follow them to the police station to get these permits, and then they arrested him there. Clever ruse, but how stupid are you? Like, how stupid are you? Excuse me, I swallowed my spit again. Dillinger and Frechette arrived in Tucson and went to Clark's home, which was now under surveillance, and the couple was arrested on the spot. Tucson police managed to arrest Dillinger and his entire inner circle in less than a week. A bidding war over the terror gang began between Indiana, Ohio, and Illinois. On the 29th, the gang all signed waivers of extradition to Wisconsin. After Wisconsin struck a deal with Arizona about giving them part of the reward money, it got blocked by Indiana State Police Captain Matt Leach, who stepped in and won the war for Dillinger and the gang to be brought back to Indiana. Pierpont was on the hook for Sheriff Sarber's death because he was still carrying the sheriff's service weapon when he was arrested.
Mm-hmm.
Dumbass. Dillinger was taken back to Indiana by plane, while the others were taken back by train into Illinois and then were transferred to Indiana. Dillinger was taken to Lake County Jail in Crown Point, Indiana, and was under the watch of Sheriff Lillian Hawley. Now you can throw up pic 04 of JD in Crown Point. During a press conference with Dillinger, prosecutor Robert Estill was talked into buddying up.
Picture one?
Yeah, buddying up to Dillinger like this for a photo op, which would come back to bite him in the ass. So, yeah. Dillinger was funny, charismatic, intelligent. He pretty much took responsibility for everything that he did, with the exception of O'Malley's murder. Then said, quote, "I don't drink much, and I smoke very little. I guess my only bad habit is robbing banks. Now, you see, fellas, I ain't such a bad guy at heart. I try to be right, unquote. On February 1st, 1934, Pierpont, Clark, and Mackley were taken to Michigan City. Mary Kinder was diverted to a women's facility in Indiana. On February 9th, John's trial was set for March 12th. Pierpont, Mackley, and Clark hated Michigan City so bad that all three signed waivers to be extradited to Ohio, where they would face the death penalty. That's got to say something about the state of Michigan City Penitentiary, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sheriff Lillian Hawley added armed guards inside and outside of her jail, and Dillinger was under 24-hour surveillance with guards armed with machine guns between 6 heavy steel doors between prisoner and outer block. And then Dillinger hires Chicago lawyer Louis Piquet to take on his case. Now on March 3rd, you can show the pic number 5 of the fake gun. Sam Calhoun, who worked as handyman at the Lake County Jail, made the biggest mistake of his career. Not realizing that the inmates were all out of their cells, he opened the doors. Dillinger seized the opportunity using a fake gun that he had carved using 2 razor blades, wood from a washboard, and painted black with black shoe polish. He took Calhoun hostage with inmate Herbert Youngblood, who was serving prison. He was on death row for first-degree murder. Started putting everyone who got in their way into cells, taking other hostages in the process when Calhoun no longer served their purpose. And they would still keep locking them in. Dillinger and Youngblood make it to the garage, and stole a car that belonged to Sheriff Lillian Hawley. Dillinger's escape ruined Hawley's career, making her the subject of sexist jokes, and would make it harder for women to get into law enforcement for decades to come. Hoover's hunt really began now. Every plan he had hinged on taking Dillinger into custody. And if I remember correctly, didn't Matt Leach say if Dillinger was put into an Indiana prison, this would never have happened, meaning his escape? But he was in the Indiana prison and he escaped anyway, so...
Oh, yeah.
You look like an ass. So Dillinger dropped off Youngblood because obviously 2 escaped prisoners on the run, 1 white, 1 African-American, would draw a lot of attention to you. So they went their separate ways. Youngblood ended up getting shot and killed by police.
Of course.
So Louis Piquet reunited him with Billy, John Hamilton, and John's girlfriend, Pat Sherrington. And the 2 sets of lovers drove to St. Paul, Minnesota, where they hooked up with Babyface Nelson's crew and Homer Van Meter. On March 6th, the new crew robbed a Sioux Falls, South Dakota bank. On March 8th, Pierpont's trial began in Lima, Ohio. The trial lasted 3 days, and he was found guilty of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to death, with the execution set for July 13th. On March 12th, Mackley's trial began, and like Pierpont, his trial lasted 3 days, and he too was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. Russell Clark was found guilty, but was spared the death penalty and was sentenced to life.
Sentenced to... Oh, okay.
So...
Yeah, no, I get it. Sorry, it just sounded weird.
For people out there who are going like, but Pierpont was the one who shot the sheriff. He did not shoot the deputy. Right? Nobody shot the deputy. So why is Mackley and Clark on the hook for this murder? Well, it works this way. Say you, Matt, and I go to rob a bank. Matt's sitting in the car. He's the getaway driver.
Yep.
You vault over the thing because I'm not very agile. And I shoot somebody. Even though you guys told me, don't hurt anybody. But I shoot somebody. Because we were all involved in the commission of a felony crime, we are all on the hook for that murder.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's why. And it's still like that today. Like today. You can't rob a bank and you can't control the other person's actions, but you're still on the hook for their actions. So yeah. Anyways, Dillinger and Babyface's gang hit up a Mason City bank for $240,000, which they publicly said they had in their reserves. But the gang only got $52,000 for all of their efforts. There was a guard tower, and the guard threw tear gas down. Because they had little holes. You can throw tear gas and you can shoot from. They didn't realize this upon their casing the joint beforehand. Hamilton and Dillinger were both shot in the shoulder by a judge whose office was on the 3rd floor of the bank. So, John Hamilton again gets shot. Like, how unlucky fucking are you? Right? On the 27th, Ed Schaus and Harry Copeland's trial began. In Crown Point, Sam Cahoon and Ernest Blunk, who was also complicit in helping or getting them out of prison, were indicted for complicity in Dillinger's escape, even though none of that was intentional. They were made to do it. I'm actually surprised they did that. You can put up the pic of JD again if you want. The first one. April 6th to April 8th, John and Billy went to the Dillinger family farm in Mooresville for a visit. John and half-brother Hubert tried to visit Harry Pierpont's family, only to find that they had moved. And on the 8th, they had a nice big family dinner. John spent time with his dad, going out for walks, spending time with his brother, his niece, Mary. But the feds were starting to close in on them. And because of the way that the farm was sitting, Mary actually noticed cars driving back and forth repeatedly. And it didn't take a genius to figure out that those cars were the feds. So the family took a car, as a leading car, led them away, and Billy and JD were able to get away. But a couple days later, John dropped Billy off at a few blocks away from a restaurant and went to park the car. And while he parked, Billy was arrested. And he was powerless and knew he couldn't do anything to help her because he would likely get killed or she would get killed if he tried to rescue her. Yeah. So on April 22nd, this is where things get really messy for the feds. So J. Edgar Hoover appointed Melvin Purvis as the lead on the Dillinger case. On April 22nd, the gang headed up to a secluded resort called the Little Bohemia, owned by Emil Monatka. They just wanted to relax, have quiet time, just kind of recharge. Emil saw a newspaper and realized who he had at his resort. He asked Dillinger who he was. Dillinger reassures him that all they want to do is just relax and enjoy the quiet, which Emil agrees to because he's getting a hefty sum of money for this. But he tells his wife, Nan, who flips out, and she goes to her family, and they all contact the feds to tell them that the Dillinger crew is at their resort. So, while the gang decides to leave a day early, Nan scrambles to get word to the feds that the plans have changed. And the feds come in to take over, Dillinger into custody. 3 of the feds park their cars in a pointed V shape at about 100 meters away from the entrance of the resort. But at the same time, 3 civilian men had just left the restaurant for their $1 special, dinner special. And they had the radio really loud, and they didn't hear the feds say stop, police or law enforcement or whatever the hell they said, right? And ended up getting shot at. And 2 of the 3 men were wounded, and 1 man was killed. Mm-hmm. With all this going on, Agent Purvis, Hugh Clegg, and Arthur McLuhan was basically, they just fucked up big. Huge. Because Dillinger and the crew escaped. They were jumping off the roof, running in different directions. Babyface Nelson took one direction. Hamilton and Van Meter and Dillinger went off in another direction. So, they ditched any woman that they had. They did. I'm like, wow. I guess you gotta drop the baggage, right? So sorry, not sorry. Anyways, so the agents, other different agents came up on Babyface Nelson, and there was a big shootout where 1 agent was killed and 1 constable was pumped through bullets while he laid in a ditch dying already. Babyface Nelson was a psycho.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So basically, Dillinger was more guilty by association than anything.
Yeah, because he doesn't like to kill people.
He didn't like to kill people, and he didn't really want to kill O'Malley either.
No.
So Van Meter, Hamilton, and Dillinger stole a car and took off. As they were driving through, Dakota County Sheriff's deputies spot them. Deputy Norman Dieter took a .30-30 rifle and fired, blowing out the 1 tire, and another bullet ripping through the back of the car, through the back seat, and right into John Hamilton's back. So he is obviously a bullet magnet. Despite being down 3 tires, Dillinger and Van Meter rushed to Chicago to find help from Hamilton. On April 23rd, the press published an estimated amount that the manhunt for John Dillinger had cost the government so far at $2 million, which is equivalent to $47,413,582.09 today.
Wow.
Which was 4 times more the amount than John Dillinger had robbed banks of. Sounds ridiculous. On April 26th, John Hamilton died. On May 3rd, Dillinger and Van Meter robbed a bank in Astoria, Ohio. And on May 15th, Billy Frechette's trial began, and Louis Paquette was given 2 letters from Dillinger, a love letter for Billy and a letter for Pat Charrington from Dillinger, where he told her that Hamilton, her boyfriend, left or died, and then she was mad because he didn't leave her any money. So Dillinger sent her some money from the Astoria job, which Hamilton had nothing to do with because he was already dead.
Yeah. That was nice of him.
Right. May 23rd, Billy Frechette was found guilty of harboring a fugitive, fined $1,000 and sentenced to 2 years in prison. On May 28th, Dillinger had plastic surgery. 2 moles were removed. A scar covering of it's the juice. The small scar over his lip was covered up. The infamous chin cleft was fixed up. Wasn't completely gone, but it was like not as deep, not as prominent. He had his nose fixed and his skin tightened, pulling his face. 2 days later, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror and was not happy because he didn't look any different. On June 1st, the doctor who did his surgery came back to give Homer Van Meter, you're not saying Doe? Okay, his plastic surgery and agreed to make further changes to Dillinger's face. He also agreed to remove their fingerprints in a painful procedure using 2 parts hydrochloric acid and 1 part hydrochloric acid mixed with an alkaloid and applied to the raw tips of your fingers after the outer skin had been removed. Apparently it wasn't John Dillinger's favorite thing to be done. On June 5th would be the last time Dillinger would see his associate Tommy Carroll. On June 7th, Carroll and girlfriend Jean Delaney, who was pregnant, were on their way to her mother's house to tell her the exciting news. They had stopped at a gas station, was recognized by a gas attendant, and when they went to a tavern to have lunch before they carried on, police shot Tommy Carroll in the back 4 times, and right in front of his pregnant girlfriend, and he died the next day in the hospital, and Delaney would miscarry their baby from all the stress. The feds were being hammered by the press and suffering immense embarrassment over the disastrous little Bohemia fuck-up. Melvin Purvis was demoted and Sam Cowley was now taking the lead. You can show up the pic of 06, Polly. So now we're getting into the setup, okay? Dillinger met a Billy Frechette doppelganger named Rita Polly Hamilton. He told her he worked for the Board of Trade and that his name was Jimmy Lawrence. Now, there's no indication that she actually knew who he was or not.
Okay.
So she might have known, but there's no indication in records that she knew that he was John Dillinger. She may have just been stupid enough to think he was Jimmy Lawrence. But Polly was associated with a madam named Anna Sage, who immigrated from Romania. Sage had multiple run-ins with the police and closed one brothel to open up another one in Chicago. And she knew exactly who Jimmy Lawrence was. And now she was also facing deportation in 1934. She was also in a kind of relationship. She was basically just having sex with a dirty cop named Sergeant Martin Zarkovich. When Polly introduced her new boyfriend, Jimmy Lawrence, to Anna, she did know right away who he was, and also knew that John Dillinger had a bounty of $15,000 on his head. And she wanted that money. That's about $355,601.87 today. So that's quite the reward money.
Yeah.
And she wanted it. So she offered Jimmy Lawrence, a.k.a. John Dillinger, an apartment for him to stay. And Dillinger, who wasn't put off by her shady background, because that's normally who he hung out with anyways, accepted. On June 27th, Harry Copeland was sentenced to 25 years in prison. On June 30th, Dillinger, Babyface Nelson, Van Meter, John Paul Chase, Jack Perkins, and quite possibly Arthur Pretty Boy Floyd pulled what would be their last bank robbery in South Bend, Indiana. Oh, my ass. The pillow's not helping.
No.
So during this robbery, both Van Meter and Nelson were wounded, and Nelson killed a police officer. On June 13th, Pierpont and Mackley were supposed to be executed, but it got rescheduled. Lucky them. On July 19th, sorry, I think I said June 13th, but I meant July 13th. On July 19th, Anna Sage and Martin Zarkovich made their plan on how to cash in on John Dillinger. Dillinger and Polly had gone to an amusement park that day, and as it turned out, Dillinger was a freak for roller coasters. I have that in common with him.
Yeah.
I also do like money. Not enough to rob a bank, though.
I think everyone likes money.
On July 21st, Zarkovich and his captain, Tim O'Meal, met with the feds. The plan was about to come together. Anna Sage started by saying what she wanted besides the $15,000 reward money, but that she also didn't want to be deported. Well, Melvin Purvis said that he could not guarantee her immigration status, but would put in a recommendation, and that she'd only receive a portion of the money, but didn't say how much at that time. Despite the outcome she was hoping for, Anna Sage told them that they were likely to go to the movies and that she didn't know which theater they'd be going to. Usually they go to the Marlboro, but they might go to the Biograph. So Purvis, Cowley, and Agent Gillespie put two teams together, one to sit on the Marlboro, which was playing a Shirley Temple movie, and the other team at the Biograph, which was showing Manhattan Melodrama, a gangster film starring Clark Gable, who was also quite hot at the time. They sent Zarkovich and the weaker team to the Marlboro Theater because a gangster's going to a gangster flick.
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't trust Zarkovich. You can pick number 8, the Biograph. On July 22nd, it was 100 degrees outside, and the agents were waiting on Anna Sage to bring them the last bits of information. When she reached out, she described what John likely would be wearing, which he actually wasn't, because it was too hot, and what Polly might wear, but she would be wearing a bright orangey red skirt, which she did wear. At 7 p.m., 30 feds and police from East Chicago, Indiana Police Force gathered and told them that at 9 p.m., their target with the two women would be going to the movies, but not sure where. So one team went one, and one team went to the other. The signal would be when a point man lights their cigarette or cigar. At 9 p.m., Dillinger, Polly, and Anna arrived at the Biograph Theater, and an agent rushed in to call the other theater to let the other agents know to get their butts to the Biograph. Agent Purvis was impatient. He kept bugging the ticket taker girl. What time's the movie getting out? How much longer? Blah, blah, blah. She was actually creeped out by him so much that she called talked to her manager. Her manager called the Chicago Police Department, who were not brought in on this sting and had no idea what was going on. So when they arrived, it was 5 minutes before the movie got out, and they were asking for IDs of the agents and the East Chicago Police Department, because East Chicago was in Indiana. It's not Illinois like Chicago was. And just in the nick of time, Purvis spots Anna Sage in her bright orangish red skirt, sees Dillinger, lights up his match, notices that some of the agents didn't see him do it, so he lights up another one. And this is just after 10:30. So John, sensing something was wrong, he turned and looked directly into Agent H.E. Hollis's eyes. He looked away, noticed an alley, and knowing that that was his best route to escape, he started heading in that direction. Hollis was now approximately 6 feet behind him, and Dillinger and the ladies were almost at the alley when Purvis was closing in on the right. In front of him were agents Lockerman and Wells. He let go of the ladies and started to run. And while trying to reach for his .380 pistol, which I'm assuming is a smaller gun in his pocket, he ran into a woman, Etta Natlensky, knocking her down as 4 shots were fired. One bullet entered Dillinger's chest, another hit Etta Natlensky, and a .45 caliber entered through the back of Dillinger's neck, went through his brainstem, and exited under his right eye. Purvis knelt over Dillinger's body, took the gun out of his hand. The gun still had the safety on. Agent Gillespie, who was with Dillinger when he took his last breath, estimated that Dillinger was alive for about 3 minutes after being shot. Both Anna Natlensky and 29-year-old Teresa Paulus were caught in the crossfire. Paulus caught a ricochet bullet into her hip, but fortunately both women were okay. Doesn't look good for the feds, but
it was probably going to happen.
It was probably bound to happen, yeah. At 10:55 p.m. on July 22nd, 1934, John Herbert Dillinger was officially pronounced dead by Dr. Walter Persig. That boy did. Despite the procedure to eradicate his fingerprints, they were what identified Dillinger. So the procedure did not work. Dillinger had taken about $3,700 of them in cash to the theater, but the paperwork said he only had $7.70 in his pocket, and it was likely that the police took it and divided it up. Dr. Butler and Parker discovered powder burns on the wound at the base of Dillinger's neck, indicating he was shot at close range. You can put up the murder board if you want. Murder board. Murder board. We're almost done. Okay, not really, but we're almost A lot of money was attempted to be made from John Dillinger's death. 2 plaster casts of his face were somehow made, but they would be confiscated. J. Edgar Hoover kept one on display outside his office until his own death in 1972, and the other went to Dillinger's family. People were dipping rags in the spilled blood of the infamous bank robber that was still on the ground to sell off. Mortuary workers wrote up multiple toe tags, placed them on his body for a couple of minutes, and then sold them. It was a different time, folks. You could actually, they posted his dead...
It's the same thing as farting in a jar.
Yeah. Right?
It wasn't a different time. People are still screwed.
I don't know. The toe tags, at least you have something physical to... Hey, this was John Dillinger's body.
Well, you can huff that fart real good.
Anybody could just put a lid on a jar and say there's a fart in there. You don't know there's a fart in there. Unless it was a good one. A good hot one. But it was a different time. Shut up, Matthew. Where you could actually put the picture of his dead body on the cover of a newspaper. We're not showing it here, but if you want to see it, you can just Google John Dillinger's dead body.
Actually, a lot of the times, even the cowboys and stuff like that, they would line them up in their coffin, standing up, and take a photo of it. They're kind of like trophy shots.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, and then we wonder why serial killers in the 70s were the way they were. Yeah. Excuse me.
Trying to get some fame too, because the cops were taking.
Yeah. When processing was complete, his body was put on public display with a lineup of people going about a quarter of a mile.
Wow.
Over 15,000 people came to see his dead body.
It's crazy.
That was before he went home. John Dillinger Sr. and his youngest son, Hubert, came to pick up Junior's body from Chicago and brought it back to Mooresville, where he was placed in a $100 casket draped in lavender cloth with a picture of his 16-year-old self above him. It was put on display at his sister Audrey's home, which back then they used to lay in... like they call it the Lane State, but it was always done in like the parlor of your home, right? And anyways, Audrey's home was in Maywood, but she had to hire security to keep the public from getting in to sneak a glimpse. The family set the funeral date for July 26th, purposely told the press and public different details so that they could bury John privately next to his mother at Crown Hill Cemetery. John Dillinger Sr. was worried about the grave robbers and body snatchers, so he had his son encased in cement and then scrap metal and more cement, so that would make it really hard to get through. And he didn't even put a headstone marker on it until 2 years after. Since then, the headstone has been replaced up to 4 times because people wanted to would chip pieces off of it as souvenirs, which is basically deprecation. What's the word I'm looking for?
Defecation.
That sounds like pooping.
Degradation.
It's vandalizing. Desecrating. See? Juice helps. A month later, Homer Van Meter was gunned down on August 23rd. In September, Mackley and Pierpont attempted to escape while making fake guns, just like their hero, Dillinger, but it didn't work. Mackley was killed and Pierpont was wounded. Pierpont was then put to death on October 17th by electric chair. Babyface Nelson killed Agent Sam Cowley and H.E. Hollis in a deadly shootout, which also ended in his own death. Agent Purvis killed Pretty Boy Floyd on October 22nd, 1934, on an Ohio farm. That's really hard to say.
Ohio farm.
When Billy Frechette was released, she went on a carnival tour telling her story of her love for John. She died January 13th, 1969, at the age of 62 from cancer. A month later, plus a day, Polly Hamilton died February 14th, 1969, at the age of 59, also from cancer. John's first wife, Beryl Holvius, died of a stroke November 30th, 1993, at the age of 87. Mary Kinder died in 1981 at age 72. Russell Clark was released from prison in 1968, but died 5 months later from cancer. Anna Sage received only $5,000 of the reward money, which was $15,000, and was deported back to Romania in 1936, just in time for World War II. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that would have sucked to be her. I don't know what happened to her after that. John Sr. died in 1943 and was buried next to his son. His brother Hubert died May 8th, 1974, and sister Audrey was 98 when she died in 1987. Former Sheriff of Crown Point, Lily Hawley, never, ever talked about Dillinger and his escape for the rest of her life. She died in 1994 at the ripe old age of 103.
Wow.
Yeah, imagine having the worst life ever because of one thing, and you live the longest. Like, that's, yeah. You can put up the picture of John for number 1.
I think we've been using that a on.
Yeah, but it's the best picture I have of him, right? John Dillinger's legend lives on to this day. This Midwest bank robber's fame spread all over the world. His escapades made international news. It lives on how banks are constructed today. The security plans, the way vaults are operated, higher bank counters to prevent any Dillinger wannabes from pulling off his signature move of jumping the counters. Dillinger also reshaped how law enforcement operates. All cars were equipped with two-way radios. They were armed better. Firearm training became more complex and mandatory, and they were given faster cars with bulletproof glass. J. Edgar Hoover got the credit he wanted by Attorney General Cummings, who signed Hoover's federal law enforcement bill. In 1935, the Bureau of Investigation became the Federal Bureau of Investigation, aka the FBI, which Hoover ran until he died in 1972. If his men never caught or killed John Dillinger, the FBI would not exist today. A fact that was not lost on Hoover, whose office was a shrine to the bank robber. He had the hat and the gun that Dillinger had on him the day he was killed, and some coins, as well as one of the death masks. 28 lives were lost in these 18 months. 11 law enforcement, 11 gangsters, 6 civilians, and many more wounded. So, Matt, you want to hear about the conspiracy theories, don't you?
Yeah, what do you got?
All right, so some conspiracy theories surround the death of him. His autopsy from the FBI doesn't match Chicago's death report. One thing that stood out was that John's eyes were listed as brown, but John actually had steely gray blue eyes.
Oh.
His age, height were also wrong, and he had missing teeth. His brain was removed and studied and kept in a jar of formaldehyde, but the jar has gone missing.
Oh.
And this
He's
is
a zombie.
Yeah, and this is my favorite. You ready?
Yep.
Allegedly, John Dillinger had quite the enormous penis,
Oh, big baby.
and that it was removed and saved for prosperity. Granted, none of his lady loves ever verified the size of his member, but they said it was enormous. So there was rumors that it was actually taken to the Smithsonian and it was kept there as a display. But when you go to the Smithsonian, apparently it's not on display, and nobody will deny or confirm that it's actually there. But they say that he was actually buried with his penis intact. So dissect that at your own will. But it kind of makes you wonder, was there ever a dildo named the Dillinger?
Oh, probably. Yeah.
I tried Googling it. You don't want to know what came up. In the past couple of years, John's nephew, Mike Thompson, and great-nephew Travis have decided to look into their infamous uncle's death. And do not believe the FBI got him that fateful, hot Chicago night. Mike's mother, Frances Dillinger Thompson, told stories of his infamous uncle his entire life, so he took an interest in the subject. His son Travis, in a strange twist of fate, worked in law enforcement and joined his father looking for answers by following the evidence. Their theory was that Mike's grandfather had his uncle's body removed from the cemetery and buried on the family farm. John Sr. was always concerned about grave robbers and body snatchers. He was even asked to give up the body for $10,000. Right? So when Mike made the choice to start the process to exhume his uncle's body, he was stopped by the FBI. When the FBI found out about this plan, they went to the Crown Hill Cemetery, copied all of their files, and then went to the health department to stop them from giving Dillinger's nephew any more permits. Travis told CSI and Cold Case Institute founder Cheryl McCollum on her Zone 7 podcast that his grandfather didn't have $50 to embalm his son, so how the hell could he afford to put concrete in the grave? If he didn't, then who did? He feels that all the evidence points to an imposter in his great-uncle's grave. The feds in Hoover, if you look at it a certain way, were under hot water. They were under a lot of scrutiny, and all over the multiple failed attempts of trying to capture Dillinger. So it would behoove them to avoid more embarrassment by at least capturing somebody and saying it's Dillinger, right? So, Melvin Purvis had never even seen Dillinger in person, just pictures. The FBI reports were sloppy compared to their other organized and very detailed reports from the same era. The Dillinger farm is now owned by someone else, but he allowed canines on the property. Different breeds at different times, all independently or all by themselves. One Doberman hit on a spot and kept returning to that spot, and later that day, other dogs were hitting on the same spot, but they didn't dig there yet. Not yet, anyways. I think they are planning to eventually.
Yeah.
After using ground-penetrating radar, 47 mason jars were found. One had an old Shell gas station map of the entire United States with strange markings on it. Dillinger's brother Hubert owned a Shell gas station, and the family is still looking for answers to this day. So impressions. What do you think?
How many times did he get shot overall? Like 12 times?
Overall, 4, 2, probably about 10, maybe, give or take.
That's luck after luck after luck. Like, not, oh, you got bad luck, you got hit. More like, how the hell did you survive that many times?
Well, John Hamilton was the bullet man.
Yeah, he was the one that got shot all the time.
He got shot a lot.
But then eventually died.
Yeah. Well, so was
But not
John.
from being shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did.
was it?
Yeah, because it was that
Yeah.
shot through the back in the
Yeah.
car that did it when they were escaping Little Bohemia. I don't know. I don't have a hatred for John Dillinger. I think actually it's kind of romantic. But
I
then
don't think he really
What's romantic about it?
was that bad. I mean, yes, he stole money.
I think it was just the gangster thing, that gangster, like the anti-hero, the way he treated his malls, like Billy was treated well, you know, like there's never any accusations that he was abusive or bad to his women. Actually, they all said that he was always treating them so well, would buy them things, was kind and courteous. He didn't even cuss in front of them. Like,
That doesn't make him a great dude, though.
no, but you've dropped F-bombs in front of me. I dropped more in front of you. But, I don't know. I think there's something about the 20s and the 30s anyways that I'm more attracted to as an era. And I just think it's that romanticized way that it's always portrayed.
It's probably Hollywood.
Well, probably, but like,
Well, they didn't make it into Hollywood.
they did make it into Hollywood. Hollywood did a lot with
Was
this.
it Johnny Depp? Yeah.
Johnny Depp did play Dillinger.
Yeah.
Mark Harmon played Dillinger. There's a lot of Dillinger movies out there.
Yeah.
I think Johnny Depp's was Public Enemy #1. I think that was the title.
I'll have to watch that. I haven't seen it.
I might watch the Mark Harmon one.
Yeah.
I like Mark Harmon.
Yeah.
Young Mark Harmon.
He's the NCSI guy.
NCIS, yeah. But yeah, I just found it interesting that what if they didn't? Obviously, John Dillinger is dead now for sure. Well, even if that was not him that they killed in 1934. If that wasn't him, he's definitely dead.
Wouldn't
He's
he
gotta be
still
like that.
rob banks? I couldn't see him like quitting doing that, you know?
Not necessarily.
It
Maybe.
was kind of his thing, right?
Yeah, so I mean, like, he would probably use another name or.
Well, didn't his nephew say that even if he didn't die that day, he would have been dead if not long after? He probably would have.
Someone would have caught him.
Yeah, somebody else would have caught him, and instead of making it look foolish, they just kind of buried it.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
But, I mean, then again, he could have been on the run for the rest of his life.
Yeah,
really.
maybe that was too close.
Yeah.
Couldn't trust anybody after it. And then he finds out all his team has been taken down, like one by one by one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd hide too.
Me too.
Or he went to South America, like they were saying. Like,
Yeah.
right? So he could have been like another continent. you know?
Maybe. Mind you, he didn't spend the rest of his life behind bars.
No.
Um,
But the way.
I don't think shooting him in the back, because if you're shooting close range, you gotta be damn close.
Yeah.
And that also means that it was an execution.
Yeah. And the way they say that he looked at them, I think it was him. I think he died. I think they killed him.
But do you really see him being taken down by a woman? Because ultimately that's what happened.
Why not?
Why
I mind
not?
you, the nosy landlady got him arrested the first time, right?
Yeah.
So, anyways, lots to dig into and think about. I read the book John Dillinger by, I think his name is Darcy Matera. It was good. I recommend it. It took me a while to read it because I just couldn't get into it, or things were really hectic at work. So it took me a bit to get into it, and I'm like, I just want to read this book. And then by the time I got through that and watched all my documentaries and watched different videos and podcasts and stuff, I didn't finish writing this until this morning. So I wanted to condense it down a bit more, so I'm sorry if it was very rambly, but there's a lot of information, and a lot of it I left out. Like, I left out a lot of bank robbery details. So if you want those details, plus every type of car, because Darcy Matera, in his book, details every car that John Dillinger and his team ever stole, drove, bought. You can tell it was written by a man. I'm assuming Darcy's a man. If you want to know every type of clothes they wore, okay, maybe it's a woman. Read the book. If you want to know every city they drove to, through, and out, then go read the book. It's a good book.
Read the book.
But if you take out those details, the book would go from 300 something pages to like 200 pages. Okay? That's just details that I don't need when I'm trying to research, but it was a good book. Like, I'm not trying to knock it. So, yeah. All right.
Good.
So, I think next episode, Colleen's taking the lead with a topic. And so, yeah, we'll have to wait. So, come back in 2 weeks. And, Greg, anything?
It was fun.
Yeah.
I learned a lot.
Yeah?
Yeah, I had a good time watching the videos and listening to the podcasts, that you recommended.
Yeah.
And it was good.
Also, check out Cheryl McCollum's Zone 7 podcast, wherever you get your podcast.